Welcome to the Serrano Brothers podcast. We are twin brothers who are pastors in the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. We talk about faith, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, culture, and anything else we think is interesting. Thanks for joining. Hi, friends. Welcome back to the Serrano Brothers podcast. And it's over. Synod Assembly is over.
It is over, man.
I went home. I got my post-Synod Assembly nap in, and now I'm feeling good, and I am excited to talk about Synod Assembly.
Yeah, so it is now 7:00 at night on the day of Synod Assembly. So, right. We just thought we could process kind of what happened for a little bit, right?
Yeah, let's talk about it.
I think first we should talk about how our podcast was received. I was a little shocked, Jeremy, how many people came up to us and said, one, that they had watched the podcast, and a lot of them said that they watched it all the way through, and they actually said how helpful it was to them in making a decision. What about you?
I was surprised. I was really surprised at how many people listened to it and watched it on YouTube.
Yeah.
And it was more than just mom and dad.
Yeah.
And Tukina on the East Coast, right? Like, right. We had more people watching it, and I was really touched that it seemed to be helpful for people.
A bishop, that's not Bishop Claire, came up to us and told us that she watched all of them too. So that was really cool. I was just really grateful a bishop did it. So that's not in our synod.
Right. I was pretty touched by that too.
Yeah.
Do you have any desk whiskey?
Oh, I have some desk whiskey, my brother. Let's
have a toast.
Yeah, let's do that. I think that's a great idea. I think that's a great idea. Got here. What are you drinking?
So this is some brandy, actually, that one of my parishioner makes.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah,
I got a little 12-year Glenlivet right here.
Oh, nice.
So, Jarrett, to a good Synod Assembly, man.
Good Synod Assembly. Salut.
So let's talk about the Synod Assembly now.
All right.
It was going in there, it felt joyous. It felt positive. It felt like there was a lot of positive vibes around. It did not have, there was not, to me, an air of anxiety, but expectation. And I thought that was pretty cool. People seemed like they wanted to get together and do it in a way that was forward leaning and positive. Right.
I agree. I felt like there was a lot of laughter. There was a lot of joy. People were excited to be there. And it was a much different vibe than the last Synod Assembly, which was so contentious and
anxious. It was anxious,
right? and painful. It was painful because of all of the stuff that went on in our synod.
Right.
And camps formed and people were fighting with each other. And I will say, I had a camp that I was a part of, right? Mm-hmm. And I will appreciate that. I really appreciate those people in our synod with whom I disagreed with on their position. But like at the Synod Assembly, we talked. Yeah. We had a drink together. We shared in the fellowship of Christ, and we still disagreed. And I thought that was beautiful for the church.
Yeah. I agree. And I also had similar conversations with people, and what I find interesting about that is that none of us doubt each other's faithfulness, right?
Indeed.
Or intentions, right? We are each being faithful to what we feel we need to be faithful to. And we are still at the foot of the cross together. And I just love that about the assembly this year. So um I think that people did a really great job. First, the planning committee
Oh
did
yeah.
did an amazing job. I know that Courtney Geibert and Charlene Lyons, they were the ones heading it up, but also Pastor Manda Truczynski. Pastor Manda was working so much, Jeremy, like she was putting in like 16, 18-hour days for a long time just to make this thing happen. And I think she really deserves a lot of recognition for what she did.
100%.
And just everybody on Synod staff too. I mean, Pastor Don, Pastor Ron, is it
Pastor
Melanie? Is that the uh secretary's name? I think her name's Melanie Gordon, if I believe that's
Okay.
right.
Okay.
And then like JJ and like everyone did such an enormous job on Synod staff.
And I think part of the vibe of assembly was that we had a really great synod staff doing all of the hard work. So you and I showed up the day before
Yeah.
to synod assembly, and we went into the business office because
Right.
our friends are in there, and
Yep.
you could just see them running around. For those of you who don't know, the night before synod assembly is chaos. It's chaos because people are working their tails off, and I saw them working, trying to put these packets together, and I was like, hey, do you need any help? And we're together, and they're like, oh yes, please. And so we sat down and we started having some wine, and we started putting these packets together. And I think it started with all of the people in that room who were in the midst of chaos, but were still having a joyful time.
Yes. Yeah. That's that was my experience too.
And so it started with the staff the day before, amidst the hard work they were doing.
Yeah, I think that's well said. And the volunteers, right? Like I mean the all of the volunteers for the Synod Pam, they did a tremendous amount of work. And we cannot say enough about how Charlene and Courtney just really helped put this thing together. And that goes all the way down from decorations to the liturgy to the hospitality to the banquet. I mean, everything was amazing.
Let me give two shout outs. First, it's to Sam Ledoux. Sam is the one who had the I'm not sure if it was specifically the vision, but is the one who put together our assembly space with the thing with the like I don't even know how to say it, the corners where with the rocking chairs and the where you would write on the wall, kind of like these stations for spiritual reflection. She
Mm-hmm.
did the painting around the baptismal font and the decoration right there, and I thought it brought a solemnity and a worshipful presence to
Yeah.
the whole assembly, and it
Right.
was just beautiful. And for me, I found in our opening worship, when people kind of stood up from all over the room and were processing the altar items to the chancel area,
Yeah.
I found that very moving.
That was
And
cool.
I had heard that we were kind of doing something like that because one of my parishioners was involved in doing but I didn't realize how moved I would be by that, and I
Yeah.
really was. So Sam, excellent job. And
And
then
and Julie Kelly was part of that too.
oh,
And
okay,
I think
okay.
she deserves a shout out for that as well. Yeah.
And then Rustin Comer and AJ for heading up the elections committee and having ballots, making sure that the election was carried out with timeliness, integrity, right? right? Because they had to do a recount at the very beginning,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
and they took it seriously, even though, that we were only over by a few votes. They're like, no, we're going to have integrity in this, and we're going to, uh, we're going to have integrity, and we're going to do it right. And so they
Yeah.
did it right, and
Yeah.
I really appreciated that.
I do think it was interesting that we had like workshops on the first day, you know,
Oh,
which was kind of cool. And you and I ended up going to a workshop on unconscious bias,
mm-hmm.
put on by Pastor Ron Valadez, who is also on the Synod staff. Um, and
So
Jer-
Ron
I,
is interesting because he works on Synod staff,
yeah,
and he works as a pastor in a congregation.
yeah,
And so he's in both feet in both worlds, right?
yeah.
So go ahead, keep going.
No, and I was just gonna say, like I've been to a lot of I've been to a lot of those kinds of, meetings, and the way he led with inquisitiveness
Mm-hmm.
and joy and non-judgment and encouraged other people in that way, it did not feel like um those times in which I get into a room and a bunch of white people are like, "Oh, I'm so sorry for being white," blah blah blah, like that kind of stuff. It was like recognizing and then moving and recognizing uh and and examining those parts of ourselves in a way that leads us to growth. And that often I have not often been part of meetings that were that good. You know what I mean?
Right.
What was your experience?
Oh gosh, I really liked what he did with us. I felt like I came away with like recognizing that we all have um
Unconscious bias?
thank you, unconscious bias. That all of our unconscious bias is not necessarily a bad thing. It's what we've been evolved into in order to save us from
Survive?
certain to survive. Thank you. And so it's not a bad thing, but that we need to recognize that we do it, and recognizing when it causes real harm.
Yeah. Yeah. That was my experience of it as well. And I thought it was well presented. And it was presented yeah, I thought it was just really well done. And and
I
and
want to
I
hear more from Ron Valadez with this kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, I do too. I absolutely do. If he did workshops for the Synod again, I'd really like to see more come out of that, because I thought it was done in a way that people could really listen to and not get into that kind of you know ho hum white fragility, guilt thing.
Right,
Like it was, I felt like people could process it, and
right.
so I was really grateful for that.
Indeed, indeed. Yeah, yeah.
So let's talk about the bishop's election now.
All
Um,
right, all right.
and
It was an exciting election. Uh, I thought it was kind of funny. So in our synod, I think in every synod, the very first vote is everybody writes down a name. And so you're not officially nominated. We had the pre-nominees on the podcast, but they're not officially nominated until the first vote when their name is written down.
right.
And so there was like 30 names or something like that. And I found it very entertaining because I'm sitting in the back of the room, all of the pastors that ran and jumped over tables and got people out of the way to get their name off of that list, right?
That was so funny.
It was
They're
great.
fighting each other to get off of the list.
Right.
Right? No, me first. Like they were
Right.
going to run out of time. Right.
Right. Don't put me on the second one. Don't put me on the second one. Right. And I think that goes with kind of yours and I understanding of bishop. It's like, in order to be bishop, you kind of got to want to be bishop, right?
Absolutely. Right.
We need somebody who wants the job, right?
Right.
So the first vote happened, and there was, Pastor Jeff Johnson was at the lead from the very beginning.
Right. He was.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, when it got down to the three final candidates, it was like, oh, okay, they were all pre-nominees.
Right.
Um, they were all on our podcast.
Yep.
And when we got into the rooms where they were asked each 5 questions and then they had 5 minutes each question, um, I gotta say, like, I was like really pleasantly, I was encouraged by how well each of them responded to each of the questions, how solid each of the answers were, you
Right.
know. And I actually left this going, man, this could be anybody's game. This could be anybody's at this point in time, you
Yeah.
know. And I think a lot of people also had that sense too. um
Yeah.
so that's encouraging because there were 3 solid candidates, 3 very solid candidates.
Yeah.
uh
And each of them had really their own gifts and their own unique um direction
yeah.
that they brought with it, right? Like John Keener. I love that guy. He's a solid guy. We did worship together during the pandemic
Yep.
over Zoom, right? Just a solid human being. And he was definitely pushing the finance part,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
John Valentine, you work with John Valentine,
Yep.
and John is the man with the plan.
Yep.
And that's the gift that he was really going for. And I think that Pastor Jeff, I work with Pastor Jeff in the at the seminary, and I think that his kind of his direction of Eucharistic spirituality really touched people. And
I think
that
it touched people too, and people could relate to it because that's many people's primary spiritual practice, right?
indeed, indeed,
So so but in the end, Pastor Jeff Johnson, he won.
right,
and
right.
and it was a good race, and I think everybody, even the three, they were happy for him as well. The final 2 candidates were happy for him. um so I just
Yeah,
think it felt joyous to me. It
it
didn't
did.
feel anxiety riddled, you know. I didn't feel like, oh, who's going to be our next bishop, you know. It felt joyous, and I'm really grateful for that. And it seemed uh and that seemed really positive to me. You know what else was positive as a part of this whole process? Usually you and I are on Twitter or on some sort of social media kind of, there wasn't a lot of, to me, social media interaction like on Twitter or
Zero.
Threads or Facebook. uh it just seemed like the hashtag didn't happen, you know. And so I found that to be really interesting as well.
I
um
was the only one tweeting stuff about our Synod assembly.
yeah.
Usually there's the what's happening in the room,
Right.
and then there's what's happening online and kind of the discussion, the online discussion about what's happening in the room. There wasn't any online discussion about what was going on. And I thought that was really interesting.
Well, and maybe and hopefully it's because they were just praying for us. You know what I mean? Because so many people said they were praying for us, you
Right.
know, as a synod. You know, so many. In fact, I just got off phone earlier this evening with Pastor Tahina Rash, and she was saying that people in her synod in South Carolina were were uh, were texting her and calling her and saying, "Hey, we're praying for the Sierra Pacific Synod,"
Yeah,
and so I appreciate. I know you appreciate too,
absolutely.
all of the people who just held us in prayer. I am so grateful for all of you. Thank you.
And, and I have to say, as a part of the vote, when Bishop David Nagler got up and
Oh,
prayed, was it the last 2 people, or was it the last 3
I think
where
it was
we all,
for the last 3.
so for the last 3, he gets up, he prays very earnestly, and I appreciated that. And then he started to sing Spirit of the Living God, and the whole Synod assembly started singing that, right? and usually we sing that at ordinations, don't we? Oh no, I don't know. I think we do. I've been to a couple where they sing that, and it was very worshipful, and for me that really kind of felt like God's presence. I felt like just fell on the place when that happened.
Yeah, it was really a beautiful moment, and I'm really grateful to Bishop Nagler for doing that, because I think that was exactly the right thing at the right time for us,
Right.
and I put us in a spirit of discernment, right? For
Indeed.
seeking the Spirit's guidance in that moment. And um that was great. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Um,
I think that's it, man.
all right. Well, let's talk about just one more thing, and that's the resolutions.
Oh, okay.
All right. So we talked two resolutions passed. If you are somebody in a congregation, you have to know it's important who you send to Synod Assembly, because they vote on things like the pastor's salary,
Right.
how much we're going to pay pulpit supply, and then any kind of resolutions that come up, procedure resolutions.
Right.
And so those things matter because they affect your individual congregation.
For sure.
Right. And the last thing, I was thinking about it as I woke up from my nap today. What we do at Synod Assembly is the business of the church, but it's not the work of the church.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We need to do Synod Assembly to take care of the business, but the work of the church is what people do in their individual congregations.
Yeah.
When they have things like La Marinda respite care, when they have preschools that are teaching about Jesus, when they have food pantries that are giving away food, when they're doing car parking at night, like
Advocacy work.
advocacy work. That is the work of the church, spreading the good news of Jesus Christ by telling his story to people so that they may come to know him. That is the work of the church. What we did was just the business of the church.
Yeah. But I do think that it is being the body of Christ together, and we need those moments,
Yes.
So I don't want to bifurcate the business of the church and the work of the church, but I do see what you're saying, and I do agree with mostly with what you're saying. And I appreciate that. Maybe we should take a second to say, our podcast is going to keep on going. And we're going to all the bishops pre-nominee said, we need more connection in the Sierra Pacific Synod. We need more connection. And so it seemed like a lot of people listened to the podcast. So we decided, Jeremy and I, that we are going to just continue doing this, and we are going to try to help bring connection to our Synod. And we're going to do this by interviewing ministries. We're going to do this by interviewing mission partners. If you have a congregation and maybe you're even a small congregation or a large congregation, and there's something that you do in the ministry that you love, that you would wish people knew, let's talk about that. Like, let's get that out there for people, and let's build each other up. Let's hype up each other's ministries. Let's get out of this mentality of being siloed. What do you say, Jer?
I'm in. And with that, we have coming on the last in a couple weeks, because we're going to put out 2 episodes a month. Next episode, we are having the Reverend Becca Davis, who used to be the pastor at St. Mark's in Pleasant Hill, but now she is the head of the Stars Ministry in Cairo, Egypt, where she oversees 40,000 refugees.
Whoa. I'm really interested to learn what's that like.
Right. So we're excited to have her on, and don't be surprised, friends, if you get a phone call from Josh or I saying, "Hey, we heard about this ministry you're doing. Would you like to come on the podcast?"
Yeah, even if you want to contact us, do that too. Like, we're looking,
we're both easy to find online.
Totally.
All right, friends, this has been the Serrano Brothers podcast. Thanks for listening.
Peace.